Well, in that case, I'm going to call us ready. Welcome, everyone. This is our MAGWest 2022 Triforce% panel, now that we can finally talk about it. I am DwangoAC. This is the director of the project, Sauraen.
Hi, everyone.
Sauraen did easily 2/3 of the effort on this, but it was still a monumental effort from a bunch of people. You'll hear more about that in a minute. So I dragged us all the way over to this MAGWest 2022 Triforce% panel just to take it all away. So we're actually going to go take a quick look at this console. All right, pull up some audio here. All right, so we're in the right place. I'm going to switch over to the Tasbot there. So we have a switch here, so we can switch which is which, and here we go. Oh, that's the wrong one. That is the wrong one.
It would not do anything.
It did nothing. I made a mistake.
So we have to skip the introduction.
Oh, we'll get to that. Don't
We have
worry.
also skipped we'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Also
So,
skip the explanation of what has happened.
As you can see, it's gotten a little bit loopy. Now, what just happened is, this is what Tasbot's known for. We plugged Tasbot into the console, and Tasbot pressed a lot of buttons very, very quickly. But the thing you're actually looking for is that green bar in the upper left-hand corner. And
That means the console is pwned.
yes. So, congratulations, we already have Ace. Now, there's something I need to explain here. This is the actual honest-to-goodness cartridge. This is the real US 1.0 release gold cart. However, we currently have a flash card in here, and the reason for that is what you just saw that took us a few seconds took us much longer on stage at GDQ, because the actual setup to get Arbitrary Code Execution takes quite a while.
Yeah, basically you have to be in the top, 50 on the leaderboard for Ocarina of Time in order to be able to do the setup for speedrunner.
Yeah.
So anyone who has that kind of skill can do the setup, and we can't. So on our team, Save State was the only one who was able to do the setup. So
Yeah.
what is actually running here is a slightly modded game that makes Ace very easy to obtain. That's the only mod. There's no injected content. All of the contents are being injected now while we're talking about it.
Yeah.
But there's no custom content in this. The only change to this ROM is that when you walk forward there where Link started and you walk forward, at that time, the game will start jumping to the controllers and executing the controller data as code, which is exactly what the whole Ace setup the first 10 minutes of the run were originally. Save State setting up glitches to have the game execute controller input as code. So this is called the shortcut ROM. You can build this ROM from our released code. If you put in the original ROM, it'll build the patch and create a patch version if you want that.
Yeah, so I'm going to turn this down. We're going to switch over to some slides, and I'll talk to you a little bit about what just happened here. So the projector inevitably is going to not like this for just a second.
And if you feel lost,
Don't worry, it'll only be more lost later. It will get better. It will get
no,
better.
that's not the right answer.
I know.
If you feel lost, normally we would have started with an explanation of everything, but we were leaving it to inject some stuff, which
Correct.
normally would be happening over the course of doing the run, is it fills up the memory with stuff that we injected, but we want to do that while we're talking about it.
Exactly. So
We'll
we
now
did things
start
out of
over
order.
from the beginning, and
So, welcome to the MAGWest 2022 Triforce% panel. What we just did was, again, just to rehash, we used a shortcut to get the ability to execute arbitrary code, something that Save State did live at SGDQ earlier this year. At this time, Tasbot is now connected to controller ports 2, 3, and 4, and we have a normal controller connected to controller port 1. And here's what just happened in the last few seconds. So there's quite a lot to unpack here, but once we got arbitrary code execution, we were able to, we were able to inject a first bootstrapper that allowed us to inject bootstrapper 2. That then modified how the game pulls for input, and then we're going to walk through all these in a little bit. That then injected bootstrapper 3, which then injected bootstrapper 4, which then injected a hyperspeed loader. Does that sound like a lot? Okay. How do you feel about breaking this down just a little bit?
you want me to break it down?
We'll go through it.
Okay.
So,
I mean, yeah, I wrote most of this, so
Yeah.
I can break it down if you want, but.
So this is what the controller data looks like in memory. And there's a couple of interesting things going on here, but the biggest thing to know is that these sections here, we don't really have a ton of, how do I phrase this? Like these sections here are always going to be 0 at the first bootloader, right?
Yeah, this is representing the state of all of the buttons on
Yes.
the 4 controllers.
Yeah.
And the control sticks. So like, A, B, Z, start, etc., and then the X and Y on the sticks. And so with the 4 controllers together, you get these 6 words. And we don't have enough ability to modify the bits in words 2, 3, 5, and 6. So we're just using words 1 and 4 to encode instructions. And instruction 4 here has to always encode a jump to safety, because it's when it's executing this code. If we don't jump back to safety, it'll just execute other things and then crash. So we only have effectively this instruction 1 that can execute once per frame when we get the ace and jump to controllers.
Right. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, but if this sounds really technical, it is. Don't worry, the whole talk is not technical, but I wanted to at least break down why this is so crazy.
Mag wanted us to do a technical panel. So we do the first 20 minutes are technical, and then the next 30 minutes are like backstory and emotional stuff and that kind of stuff. So
Right.
no need to run away if you're intimidated by the code.
Yeah, don't worry, we're going to get out of it. But this should reinforce exactly how crazy it was to make this even work. So we have a bunch of issues we have to overcome just to get this first bootloader working. But the key takeaway here is we can only get 1 instruction per frame. There's only 20 pulls per second, or basically we're only doing 20 frames per second. So we actually have that because we send every instruction twice. So our final rate is only 10 instructions per second at this first bootloader. So it's very, very slow. So yes, we can execute arbitrary code, but it's not exactly ideal. So
when you have a genie, and I'm borrowing this from Bismuth, by the way, if you have a genie in a bottle and it gives you 1 wish, what you do is you ask for more wishes.
Yes.
So that is exactly what we did here.
yeah. So we're constantly loading and storing.
We're writing another program. We're using
Yeah.
the arbitrary code execution to write another program into memory, which we will then execute, which is our next set of wishes. So we're not going directly from 1 wish to infinite wishes. We're going from 1 wish to like 3 wishes, and then, or something, to extend the metaphor a little bit.
So here's what we want to do. Now that we have the ability to wish for more wishes and continue to maintain control, the first thing we want to do is go a whole lot faster. So we re-enable controller ports 2 and 4. We jump to that allows us to jump to the controller data right away. There's a wonder item overlay that we won't get into. But basically that gets us to the point where with bootloader 2, now we're running at 60 frames, 60 times a second, 2 bytes per 2 instructions. We're basically getting 60 bytes per second. It's not a great data rate, but it's
better than what it was.
Yeah, it's better. But we can do faster. So I'm going to jump ahead a fair bit here. Actually, I jumped over 3 somewhere.
That's fine.
Yeah, that's okay.
So 3 is the same thing as 1, but at the faster rate. And then it puts in 4, and then 4 is this. So 4 takes bits from controllers 2, 3, and 4, 64 bits, and injects those every frame. So we get 8 bytes per frame, which is 480 bytes per second.
Yes, yeah, 64
and we use
bits.
that to inject the final part of the bootstrapping, which is called the hyperspeed loader. This was mainly made by another person on the team, Terrace the Bird. I helped a little bit, but this is now connected to the operating system in the N64 and pulling the controllers 8 times per frame now, and taking all of the bits from controllers 2, 3, and 4, putting them into a packet, taking the bits from controller 1 and giving them to the game like normal so you can still play. And then based on what the contents of that packet, it can write data to memory, execute code, and inject Twitch messages at the end, which if you haven't seen the run yet, spoilers.
Yeah, there will be spoilers here. But that gives us a final rate of 5,400 bytes per second, so 5.4.
Yeah, kilobytes per second. So this is roughly like a dial-up modem speed.
Yeah.
And this is happening right now.
Yep.
Tasbot, we switched away the HDMI, but Tasbot has been,
It's done, yeah.
It's done. So in the last, 7 minutes or so, we injected all of the data that we'll need for the rest of the project. We have an expansion pack installed, which is extra memory. That's a legitimate Nintendo accessory that came with Majora's Mask and some other games. And it's not used by Ocarina of Time, so it's just an extra 4 megs of RAM sitting there that we can put data in. And so while Save State was just messing around in the Lost Woods and going through the exits and talking to the Beta Kokiri, we were injecting the data for the ending and like the rest of the project, which is, the ending is most of the data. So, then that was there, and then when we got to it, we used it.
Yeah, and how we use it? Well, we have this packet format that was set up by the team, allows us to say where we want to upload data to, and then up to, I believe it's a total of 81 bytes, unless I'm mistaken.
Yeah, 81 bytes per
Yeah.
frame.
Yeah.
And that can be written to memory wherever we want, which could, overwrite contents for, changing code or whatever, but it could also just load data into the expansion pack for later use.
Yeah. The other thing you could do is call a command. It also had the same type of header setup with up to 4 arguments, looks like.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was which function to call. And then the last thing is some chat stuff we won't get into too much, but it was just a list of chat messages. And these were the only 3 packet types that we had.
That's not really true, but
Really?
those are the main ones that we used.
Oh, okay, all right. There's one other thing to talk about. That is
So
data
should I
transfer.
take
Yeah,
this
why don't you
over?
take this one?
So part of the Tasbot ethos is that Tasbot is doing what a normal human could do, except much faster. But if you slowed it down by, let's say, 1,000 times, this would all be possible for a person to do. So there's no cheating except for the speed. So we need to get data from the console back to the computer, because if anything at any time went wrong in the transfer of data and we didn't get any kind of acknowledgement back, then the data would just be wrong on the console, and then we would use it later and it would be wrong and probably crash. And so we need to get data back, but that needs to be in a way that a human could respond to if it was, thousands of times slower. So we installed virtual rumble packs in the controllers 2, 3, and 4 that Tasbot is emulating. And we have code that is running that will send back the states of those 3 rumble motors, turn them on and off in a pattern that will encode data to basically say whether this was, we'll skip that.
Sorry,
we could have
I
used
actually
a
had the wrong
controller
image.
pack, but
Yeah, we could have used control pack. We didn't.
yeah, so it was, again, a person could have done this except for the speed. So you could hold the 3 controllers and feel, oh, these 2 are rumbling. That means that there was an error. Look up in your spreadsheet or whatever. So that's how we got data back to the host, but that was mainly for error checking and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's all for oh yeah, there's the rumble. I knew
Yeah,
there were
there's the
somewhere.
rumbles.
So yeah, 1 rumble, something wrong, 2 rumbles okay. Or,
Yeah, it's a little more complicated than that.
Yeah.
But that was the version for. By the way, these slides are from Retro Game Mechanics Explained.
Yes.
IsoFreeze made them.
I should have mentioned that at the beginning. Yeah,
Yes.
IsoFreeze, huge credit to them for him making these. These are really helpful slides. I'm
Yes, so
not
this is
doing
on
them
YouTube.
justice.
He was at GDQ with us. He pressed the button to upload it right after we finished the run. So it's been up since the beginning. You can look it up. By the way, if you want more info on this, gettriforce.link is the website.
Yep. You can go to gettriforce.link to see more information about that. I'm going to close out of that so it's not consuming things. Let's get you some volume here.
Yes.
All right, so now we're going to show you what we can do with all that command.
Yeah, so this was something that we showed. This is the this is real data content, and we'll get into later more about what's real and what's not real. But yeah, I didn't give myself any. It's hard to play sideways like this, but
Yeah.
anyway, this is an example of real data content that was actually there on the cartridge. We just had to run a few instructions to cause it to spawn. But that was like the first thing that we showed, and this was part of waiting around for data to inject. But I'm going to jump to later. I'm going to jump to the Triforce, you think?
Yeah, I think so.
We added button combos that would let us warp to any point in the project, because in case it crashed while we were performing live and we had to like redo the setup and then jump to later. So this scene, not left on the cartridge, and I'll go over what was what later in it, but not left on the cartridge, but this was a scene that we made by Nintendo way back when, this Triforce realm. We looked at the old videos and screenshots and recreated it, with our tools. And yeah, I wanted to make sure that the text that was on the screen when you got the Triforce was text that couldn't have possibly been in the ROM, because it's self-referential. It says 23 years. So,
It still wasn't enough.
It wasn't enough. We'll talk about that too. But yeah, just like if this screenshot got shared around, people would think, oh, wait a minute, that says 23 years. That can't be. So anyway, well, let this continue here. you want to switch to the other slides while we're?
Sure. Do you want to? Do you want to let this play out?
Yeah, I'll let this play out. But while you're no, don't pull the plug. Just like switch to your slide to switch to the other slides. Oh, you have it up. Okay.
Sorry, yeah, but they can't see it.
Yeah, I know they can't see it.
Okay.
I was saying. Okay, you already did. Sorry about that.
Yeah,
we didn't have much rehearsal time. I'm in charge of lighting at main stage, so I was just working all weekend, and I did load out this morning or tear down this morning. So.
And I had another panel or another Calathon run yesterday, becoming busy. So yeah, it happens. It's mag time, but that's okay.
Yeah. So if you haven't seen Triforce Percent, this is the ending, or this is part of the ending. Link has gotten the Triforce, and now is being spoken to by the goddesses. They're going to ask him what he wishes for, and we have a little bit of our own fan theory about this. Well, let me first say, so when you see this set of 3 choices, we designed the choices so that the other 2 choices were silly, that nobody would want them, and then we were surprised when people actually wanted to be King of Hyrule or wanted rupees. We did consider the idea of doing rupees and having a donation incentive, but it would have had to be thousands or tens of thousands in order to have the right impact, and that would have meant we would have had to shell out so much money. So we didn't do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the other options don't actually do anything. The code completely ignores what dialogue option you choose. But so the idea was we wanted to see the future, so we picked things that people wouldn't choose as the other options. But we have a fan theory about this, that this is the goddess's final test of Link, to see if his heart actually, because the whole idea of the project was that, we go through this custom plot that we created where Link proves his courage, power, and wisdom, and becomes eligible to wield the whole Triforce. Because if he just walks up to it and touches it, he'll get the Triforce of Courage, but he won't get the other pieces. And that's not what we wanted. He had the Triforce of Courage in Ocarina of Time. We wanted him to get the whole Triforce. So, it's our sort of our fan theory about our own project, that this was a test from the goddesses. If he chose the others, he would have, gotten to be King of Hyrule, he would have gotten a big full wallet, but that would have been it. Whereas See the Future, you get, sort of a magical, transcendent experience. So, and so this is what happens next. And I'll remind you all that this is a real N64 and a mostly unmodified copy of the game, except for that shortcut which we mentioned at the beginning. That's a couple hundred bytes of changes. All of this stuff that you're seeing here has been injected by the controller input by Tasbot.
Yeah, and it's also not live video. We have done that trick before.
We could not do that trick
Nope.
with N64. Actually, the bandwidth we can get through the controllers on N64 is much lower than on Super Nintendo.
Yeah, much lower.
Much, hundreds of times or something. So we tried, but we couldn't do it, so we had to actually do it in Engine. So, the tricks here are, this is a high poly model, or it's 1,700 tries for Breath of the Wild Link, compared to Ocarina of Time Link is 500, so it's more than 3 times more complex. And also cel-shaded, so until last year, it was thought that the N64 could not do cel shading. And then myself and Glenk, who is he basically made the OOT practice ROM, so he's a huge N64 person. The 2 of us figured out a way to do it, and then this was all private and secret, and then after we figured it out, 2 other people figured out other ways to do cel shading that are totally different implementations. So now there's 3 ways to do cel shading from 0 to 3. We also have voice acting. So everyone sees the voice acting as that can't possibly be hardware. It's just the game plays other audio samples. This is just longer audio samples. It's not, we had to inject the data for the audio, but it's not WAV files. It's an internal format, but it's really not any different from injecting any of the other data that we injected.
Yeah, and at this moment, I think it's worth touching a little bit on the emotion, because at this moment in the run, we invited anyone who was watching the stream, whether they were sitting at home in another country, in the studio audience, or in the main audience there at the event. We asked all of them to come together to say here together and chat. Now, we're not going to demonstrate that here. You can hit forward.
Look!
But imagine,
and you'll see in the video,
hundreds and hundreds of names popping up so fast that we broke Twitch chat, which is not the first time we've done that.
We overloaded Twitch's servers, and they came in a batched format. So you can see all these messages, and then they go away. Of course, they never happened during the testing, because we always tested it for just a couple people. That's the first time that's happened. But it works well enough. And you even see me in the video. I'm like, oh, they're coming in like that. Oh well, whatever, it's good enough.
Yeah. And it wasn't in our control.
You asked to see our future. Here it is.
It was at this moment that my emotional capacity just overwhelmed me. You can see me in the video like, yes, I'm supposed to be stoic and just sitting there quietly while everyone is enjoying. I couldn't do it. Like my emotions got the better of me. The emotional impact of this was more than I expected, to be honest with you. This moment was very, very special.
And I'll just touch on Here Together, when we were designing that meant, Zelda brought people together.
Thank you.
Or GDQ brought people together. But it also
For all
ended
you
up
have done
meeting
for us.
together in person. But yes, also
Listen
here.
carefully.
ゼルダ姫ありがとう一緒に未来を作りましょうか
First time Link speaks. This is our last little hurrah of, we can do what we want here. Of, giving him a voice. But we wanted it to be a Japanese voice and just give a very short thing. So sort of like Mario said, thank you so much for playing my game at the end. He doesn't speak throughout the game, but we don't want Link to speak throughout the game. But, it was... represented a lot of things. And basically, Zelda and Link are giving the take-home message, or part of the take-home message. And, she says, you asked to see our future, here it is, gesturing at the fans. And then Link says, let us create the future together. So
you're seeing... Go ahead.
That's the take-home message we have. The characters themselves tell you the message, and then I repeat it at the end of the end credits speech, which I gave.
Which was very well memorized. What you're seeing on screen is the names of everyone who helped. There was a huge number of people. We estimate over 24 people over the course of easily 2.5 years.
Yeah, and I'll get into that more in the second half.
Yeah. But you're seeing some of their names on screen. There's even beta content in the end of this. We showed a lot of beta content throughout. We showed a lot of custom content throughout.
These are all cutscenes. This is still the game.
Yeah.
Like, this is still hacked up, aced Ocarina of Time with our cutscenes and our names and our music and everything. Some people didn't realize that. I guess we'll get into that more, but people just sort of thought that at some point it was all real and then we switched to a video or something for the ending.
Yeah.
People saw the Twitch messages and they're like, well, N64 can't connect to the internet, therefore, I should just mention that this is a beta cutscene.
Yeah.
Not the names, but the actual camera movement. That's a beta version of the staff roll camera flying through the Fury Forest. It's left on the cartridge, so we just, co-opted that for this. And we worked with I should also mention, we worked with some partners all on the screen there. Shout out to SeaVerGunner, which I am not supposed to say that I'm in, but that's why they worked with us on this. There's also the desert pyramid here in the background that you see there as it's fading out. That's also an urban legend. It's just like the edge of a wall, but if the camera is in the right place and there's fog, it looks like a pyramid. And so, we made the camera go there so that it look like that. Oh, you have the ESA content.
Yes, this is the ESA version.
Yeah.
I forgot to warn you about that. Yeah,
I thought about that before. It's going to say presented at European whatever.
Yeah.
So, yeah, at the end, copyright us, copyright Nintendo in the end. So, let's switch to our second half of our panel.
Yeah. And let's see what we're doing on time.
It is 3:24.
That's not so bad.
Right.
Let's see. All right.
So I'll tell you slide because I'll slide. Yeah. Yes. So history. So the ideas behind this, and this is all sort of unscripted. I just wanted to talk about this. There's the end of the technical part, beginning of the emotional part. So the ideas of this, this all goes back to the urban legends of the late 90s with Ocarina of Time, that people saw content in magazines that didn't make it into the final game. They saw content that they could get with the Game Shark. As people were pulling apart the code, they saw more pieces of it. The game always pointed outside itself because of the way it was sort of unfinished and rushed from the N64 DD to the cartridge and everything. So it was, there was always this sense that there was more to the game than you could see. And what was in the cart was in the cart, but there always was more to the game that you could see, which was the ace exploit. That was there the whole time, and people didn't know about it, and then once it was discovered, then all of this became possible. So it wasn't the thing that everybody wanted. The Triforce, getting the Triforce isn't possible without Ace. It's that scene is not on the cartridge, but the Ace exploit is on the cartridge. And so with a lot of button presses, we can make that real. So this is where this all came out of, there's a ton of people who were thinking about what the game could have been. People have been working on Ace for many, many years. You can hit the slide. So this is, Mr. Cheese made a Ace of Pokemon where he put Mew under the truck. So if you don't know the urban legend, there was an urban legend that you could use strength on this truck. I haven't played Pokemon, so pardon me if the details are wrong, but there's a truck somewhere, you could use some strength ability, push the truck, and underneath you would find Mew. And that wasn't true. But Mr. Cheese did Ace, made a hacked save file that had like a hacky Pokemon, and you could connect this to your friend's Game Boy and transfer them this Pokemon, and then it would corrupt their game, and then it would give Ace on that game, and then it would put Mew under the truck, and you could actually push the truck and with strength and find Mew. And so, that was part of the inspiration, but that wasn't the only inspiration. But on that video 4 years ago, I left a comment saying, I hope we can do this in Ocarina of Time so that we can get the Triforce. And that was, a year and a half before the exploit was found in Ocarina of Time. So when the exploit was found, I started within a week. I was like, okay, I have this one chance to do this in all of history. There's never going to be another game that has this kind of meta content outside of it that we can use Ace and bring to life. I mean, if we found Ace in Mario 64, we could put in Luigi. We have the models from the Giga Leak or whatever, but that's a little different. That's sort of like one thing. So anyway, this has been thought about since back then. At that time, in November 2019, when the exploit was found, I started a development internal Discord and a Git repo, and just started trying to recruit people and making proof of concept at first. I made a proof of concept of the Triforce scene just with ROM hacking tools, and went to MAGFest 2020 and met Dwango there, and he was kind enough to listen to some rando who had no TAS experience and almost no ROM hacking experience, and I said I wanted to do this, and he said, okay, that sounds like a cool idea. Well, what did you say? What's your side of that?
All right, I'm going to connect you to a bunch of people that can help.
Right.
Because just to say it really quickly, the Tasbot community is well over 2,000 people on our Discord server in particular. Discord.gg/Tasbot if you'd like to join. We'd love to have you. I am not a master of all of these things, but I do know a lot of really amazing people, so I knew that I could connect Sauraen with the right people, and I did.
Yes, that's why I went to you, basically. I wanted to mention another little anecdote here. So yeah, back while I was in college, I had my trusty TI-84, and I made a port with very big quotes over it of Ocarina of Time to the graphing calculator. It filled up almost the entire RAM. Like, there's no room for other programs because it was all text-based. Not very good quality game. Not going to be releasing it or anything like that. But you can just see a couple screenshots here from that. The typical OOT stuff. So it's just menus for each area that you're in, and then it would check if you had the item to let you go to the next area and that kind of thing.
I don't know if you can see this, but it says, unless I'm mistaken, Mary Rudo?
Yeah. This is actually a real text from OOT. The second and the third one are actually real text from OOT. The first one is paraphrased, but that's basically what he says.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
You didn't know that?
I didn't know about that one.
You played OOT.
Yeah, but I don't remember. Okay.
Yeah, after you get the Zora Sapphire, and she's like, you have to be my, I can give this to you, but only if you will agree to marry me, because this is the Zora's engagement
I do
ring.
remember that. I didn't realize that was what the prompt said. Okay.
It was something like that.
Okay.
Anyway, you get the idea. So at the end, so what I did in this version, and this was in 2011, and again, I am not claiming that this is good at all. This was trash. But what I did in this trashy version is I implemented the child link part of the game, and then I implemented, based on a glitch, stealing the fishing rod, I implemented a secret side quest that would lead to an alternate ending where you resolve the Skyward Sword timeline and all of that stuff. And it was pretty bad. It was pretty, cringe fan fiction kind of stuff. But the idea of using a glitch that was actually in the game of being able to steal the fishing rod and then making a plot out of that was in this from 10 years ago. So, that became sort of the same idea. And I am, it made me so happy to rediscover this on my calculator, see that ending screen. This is from, the ending of the calculator port when you find the secret ending. And then 10 years later to make this ending screen and, be able to make it real. By the way, these screenshots are from a special emulator that does low-level emulation of both the RSP and RDP, which is needed for our project. So you can't just run this in any emulator. It'll have graphical problems because of the cell shading and stuff. But anyway, yeah, so that's part of that. Let's keep going. So a lot of people were wondering what was on the cartridge. This is all on our website, by the way, gettriforce.link. We were very, very happy about that being clever.
Yes, and available.
Yeah, well, yeah, triforce.link was not available.
Yeah, sadly.
Anyway, so yeah, so this is the stuff that was actually on the cartridge that we, because okay, so we started out and we said, oh, this is a OOT beta showcase. We're going to be showing beta and debug content for Ocarina of Time, including content left on the game cartridge. So we say including, but we don't say but not limited to. So people got the idea, and we'll talk about that in a couple of slides. But people got the idea that it was all on the cart. And by the end, when it's Breath of the Wild and Twitch chat, you have to realize that was not on the cart. But
you'd be amazed how many people don't.
Yeah, one person was reacting to this on YouTube, saw Breath of the Wild, and they were like, "There's no way that was on the cartridge, right?" It's like the Breath of the Wild model. Okay, anyway, so
and it's not just one. I probably can point to about 100 comments like that. It's amazing.
So we'll get to that aspect in a moment. But anyway, this is the list, and the things that say arguable, by the way, what we showed is not on the cartridge, but there are some hints or elements of that are there, so that we can say that this is like we've brought this to life or created what it could have been or something like that. So there is some hint that implies that this may have been considered in some way, but the actual contents that were not. So for example, melting the ice in Zora's domain. The way the actor is set up in the scene for the ice and the water, it's one actor that handles both of them, and it can handle, like it checks every frame for whether Link is child or adult for which one to do, which it's the condition is whether Link is child or adult. The condition is not have you set a flag for have you melted the ice. So it does not support melting the ice live, but they would only have to change a couple of lines of code to make it support that, and that's not the sort of the normal way that they would have made that. They would have made 2 different scene setups with 2 different actors, or an actor with different parameter. Sorry if that's going over most of your heads, but there's a different way that they might have done it if they were never intending you to be able to melt the ice, and the way they did it looks like it was sort of prepared to be able to do that if they made a small change. So that's what we're talking about, like arguable, that kind of thing. Slide, please. And then these are the things that are not on the cartridge. So the left list is things that were actually made by Nintendo way back when, shown in like screenshots and videos from the mid-90s, but were not left on the cartridge. And so we remade them completely from scratch, with our team 3D modeling and whatever. So you can say that they're real beta content, because Nintendo actually, you can see the old screenshots of the Triforce room, but it was not actually on the cartridge. And then there's things that were urban legends that we didn't make up, but somebody else made up. So the Overture of Sages made up by Ariana Almondoz. That's sort of the most famous one. And then, of course, the idea of beating the Running Man. So many urban legends about, oh, you do run around this tree 64 times, and then you can beat the Running Man or whatever. And then there's the stuff that we made up. So nobody had thought of Running Man boss battle. We thought, okay, you beat him. Well, he just gives you something. No, he's got to be upset. He's going to kick your ass. And
you have to actually beat him.
Right. You beat him in the race by cheating, and a lot of people got that we were playing with things when it went through this whole cheater storyline, because we had a corrupted timer and we played with the time and went back in time, and then he calls us a cheater, and then he says we cheated better than him, and it's like. It was sort of a meta thing, but
yeah, it was interesting, the suspension of disbelief, though.
Right. So that brings us to the next slide. This is the slide on presentation. So we're sort of in a mixed kind of situation after the project in terms of the whole what was beta content issue, because basically what happened is we showed this, and a lot of people thought way more of it was actually left on the cartridge than actually was. And people responded to that in sort of 3 different ways. One is that people sort of realized at some point through the presentation that it wasn't, like they thought that it was all beta content left on the cartridge, and then at some point in the presentation they realized it wasn't, and then they felt like cheated or spoiled in they had some negative response to that. Most people had a positive response to that experience, but some people had a negative response. Some people like thought it was all real and then found out in the YouTube comments or whatever, found out in some other sense that it wasn't, and then would like argue or whatever. And then some people just never found out at all and just still think that you can get the Triforce in Ocarina of Time without Ace. Because you can get the Triforce in Ocarina of Time if you do Ace, but not without it. So, and part of that was because we presented this as beta showcase. So that was an aspect where, this project is called Triforce%. We wanted to surprise people with the Triforce. We wanted people who knew about these urban legends to figure out where it was going as they were watching it and realize, oh, this looks like it's going to be this looks like it's going that way. And we succeeded in creating that experience for those people. And for a lot of other people, it was just like, oh, this is a cool technical showcase, and then the ending was meaningful and everything. But we had to say it was something for GDQ. Like, we can't just say OOT something. Like, we have to say something about it. And it's true that we showcased beta content that was left on the cartridge and also beta content that was not left on the cartridge. And we never said that it was all beta content. But people, most people this isn't like a slight against anybody, but just like most humans at most times in their life are not putting a huge amount of intellectual capacity towards everything they're reading. People just see something and just interpret it. And that's like, again, this isn't a criticism about anybody. Like, I do that, everybody, that's just how we engage with the world. And so people heard beta content, people heard left on the cartridge, and then they just, the easiest conclusion to come to was it was all left on the cartridge. It was all real beta content. And that wasn't the case. We were very clear about what we said and careful wording, but careful wording goes over the heads of most people. And that's not their fault. That's not a slight against them. That's the reality of how humans work. So we sort of have mixed feelings about it, or at least I do. I guess you do as well. We didn't want to spread misinformation. We put up the website immediately after. We linked to it from all of our partners' videos and everything. But a lot of wrong ideas got out there into the world, and I'm sorry about that. I also don't know what we could have done differently and still maintained the experience of suspension of disbelief for everybody. Because if we could have said every step of the way, this is content that we injected with Ace. We could have done that. That would have tempered the hype of the project at best. It would have been a lower key experience. And some people would still not have understood. Yeah. Because there's still the whole technical aspect of like, what is Ace? What are you said this is not a modified cartridge, but how are you're obviously changing the content, so how does this work? And so, even we couldn't have done anything like this. We couldn't have done anything of Link getting the Triforce without the risk of somebody screenshotting Link with the Triforce and putting that up out of context, and then somebody else sees that and gets the wrong idea. So, and it was too good to not do it. So we did it, and here we are, and we've tried as much as we could to sort of damage control the issues. But another perspective just to say is like, if you're talking about harm, the harm that was done is that some people think that there is data on a cartridge from 1998 that wasn't there. So this isn't like, misinformation about serious things that affect people's lives or whatever. And the information is out there. Yeah. It's on our website. It's we're not hiding things now. So that's my piece to say about it. Is I'm sorry that was the outcome, but I'm still satisfied overall with how we presented it, and I think that's what we needed to do, is how roughly how we presented it.
Yeah, and a lot of the things we prepared for people to be upset about, no one really mentioned. I've had one comment in all of the comments on the videos. One person has complained that Link spoke.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was going to be, I thought I was going to get roasted on Twitter for that.
I know.
And we were also, so a lot of, maybe 5% or, a couple percent of the people who saw this thought the ending was cringe. And that I'm totally fine with.
Yeah,
Out of
sure.
all of this stuff that I'm going to be talking about of oh, I wish it could have been different, I don't care about that. And the reason is that, first of all, if we make 95% of the people happy and 5% of the people don't like it, great. That's most things that people do in the world don't have such a high level of positivity coming out of it.
Right.
But then also, even beyond that, this was creating an emotional experience for people. Some people are not ready or having the right day or whatever is in their life to have that kind of emotional experience, or they just didn't connect to it in the way that we did it. And so, that's okay. That not everybody has to love everything that you make. So, I was totally fine with the comments saying this is cringe. Okay, make your own thing. I hope you get a lot of views, and not in a sarcastic way. Please, make your contribution to society, and I hope it goes well for you, and I hope everyone loves it. So, this brings us to impact. So, that was some of the shadow side. We say flips the light side and the shadow side of things to stick with the Zelda motif. First impact, and this is not why I did the project. This is a large part of why Dwango did the project. Is the money.
Well, not our money.
Not money for us. Money for Doctors Without Borders.
So this was the biggest project that had been done under the Tasbot banner, and I can't tell you the impact this had on me personally of seeing the goal set to $225,000. And yeah, it kind of felt like maybe it was getting close, but let me tell you, I've been at enough of these events. This was not close at all. People would have easily overshot this if we hadn't ended the donation. Even with them stopping this donation incentive, it still overshot and hit 228,508, 518. I'm sorry, 585.
Whatever, $228K.
$585. It was way bigger than I ever expected it to be. And
just to be clear, this money was raised for Doctors Without Borders.
Yes.
We did not make a cent of this. We put in
lots of money
yeah. to hardware and all kinds of stuff
to get there. And obviously, all of this equipment, even this gold cart, this cartridge is now almost $100 these days.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this was not something we made any money off of. This was by far the single biggest impact that Tasbot content has ever had, and just so that I can say it, I fully want to thank Sauraen in particular for being the tentpole to make this happen. So thank you.
Sure, you're welcome, and thank you for your role in this. This isn't the end of the presentation, by the way, but this I didn't do it for that reason. I did it for the reasons that will be explained in the next slides. But I was still happy to, Doctors Without Borders, that much money it's probably going to save a few dozen lives. So that's by itself that's something to be said. So this is an email that I got the next day from somebody. This excerpt, I removed their name because I'm sure they wouldn't want it to be published. But we got a lot of comments like this. One person said that it saved their life. I don't know how serious they were being about that, but we got enough comments of people saying I was having a really hard time, and then this brought me to my past and give me an experience that I'll never forget, and that kind of thing. This is largely why I did it, but I'll get more into what I did in a couple of later slides.
Yeah, but it was really impressive to me that across the board, sure, there were some complaints we talked about earlier, but in all of the years I've been doing this, ever since 2013, I've never had so many people with so many heartwarming stories of how this touched them, how it brought back something from their childhood. And
we'll talk about the childhood part towards the end of the presentation.
Yeah, just a huge impact. But
yeah. Okay. So next slide. So speaking of complaints. So as I'm in two positions here, right? Because I'm a fan of Ocarina of Time, fan of beta content. I care about the stuff that Nintendo made, and I obviously care about what I made. I would have loved for this to all be available to the community. Also, as the director of a big project like this, it's my job to keep the project and the people involved with the project out of legal trouble. Distributing ROMs is not legal. Distributing patch files is sometimes legal, depending on what is in the patch file. If it is a small patch of few bytes or whatever, it's almost certainly legal. If it's like an entire fan mod crammed into a patch file, Probably not. There's probably copyrighted data in the patch file that is being distributed. So that's why we didn't distribute a patch file. We did put up on GitHub all of the code and assets that we made, that our team made, not including any Nintendo assets. So it's like 85% of all of the data that was injected. Even, like all the code, all the tools, any 3D models that we made, any textures that we made, we removed textures that were ripped from Ocarina of Time, because like we reuse textures from the game in the custom scenes, things like that. But like even in those cases, like we put up the Blender file and it just has the textures missing. So it's like almost all there, but with these few pieces missing. And it's buildable. You can build this, you can run it yourself, but the missing content is missing. So that is the answer. I'm not happy to be, people have accused us of trying to gatekeep this from people or, whatever. And like, I understand it feels hypocritical, but I also have, we have a responsibility to our team and our communities to not bring the wrath of Nintendo onto us. At best, if we put stuff up, at best, it would just all get taken down. And that wouldn't serve anybody, because better to have 90% of it up for posterity than none of it up. Then at worst they could, pursue all kinds of different things, and we just want to avoid that.
Yeah.
So,
well, the optics would be terrible if they came after the Tasbot side of things. It would really curtail us. We've now helped, between all of the different events, we've now helped raise over $1.3 million for charity. And I want to keep going. I don't want to stop here. But if we make a wrong step here, Nintendo could force us to stop, and I don't want that. It's also why Tasbot has a completely new form. We've moved entirely away from Nintendo assets for exactly the same reason.
So yeah, I mean, that's the answer to the question. So, again, everything that we've distributed is on our GitHub. There's a link from gettriforce.link to the GitHub, or you can just Google it. It's github.com/triforce-percent/triforce-percent. Yes, next one. Yeah, so another thing I wanted to talk about is the biggest struggle of the project was the working with people. Not that I'm like an antisocial type, but just the sense that this was a lot of things to do, and the people who are out there in the world who have the skills to be able to do this are few, and many of them are not available, and the ones that are available charge money. So like, our animations were not great because we didn't have a way to pay for professional animators as part of this, and then we got volunteers, and this was a lot, and they did some work, and people do what they can do in their lives with their free time, and we have to deal with that. And so as a director, that was difficult for the reason of just like having a vision and then not being able to bring it to fruition in various ways. Though it's still, I would say I was 95% satisfied with the, what this looked like at the end. But yeah, that was a struggle. But the other half of the struggle was on me, and that's why I say and lessons learned, because I don't want to make this as like, oh well, people just didn't do enough work. Well, first of all, I should say there were a number of people who did big chunks of the project who this couldn't have happened without them. For example, there's many people, but for example, Ali1234 from the Tasbot team converted the Breath of the Wild models by hand. So take them into Blender, like you have tens of thousands of triangles, do like decimate operations and stuff, and then manually go over the triangles and get them down to the N64 level. So
very label.
It was like 20 hours just for that. So that kind of thing, like I'm very thankful for that work. But even beyond that, for the people that we had sort of, that it was difficult to find a level of work that they were capable to offer and that was, would work for the project. Part of that was on me. And I have high standards, and I have a very direct way of communicating about things, of like, oh, this is what I want. I'm an engineer, right? I'm by trade, so it's like you explain, like you will cause more problems for people if you don't explain in detail what you want than if you do. Better to spell everything out in detail, and then, than to say, oh, I want this, and somebody makes something that's totally different, and then you have to go through all these revisions or whatever. So that's just how I come to everything, and I have learned that people experience precise requests as pressure. And that doesn't naturally work in my brain. Like, that doesn't mean that to me, but I have found out that that means that to other people. And so this isn't like a blaming anybody. If anything, it's blaming myself that I didn't realize that sooner. So there were a number of people, including Dwango, who felt too pressured by me. And it's not like I was saying, oh, you're a piece of whatever for not doing this. Or it wasn't like that. It was just like, oh, could we get this? Can this is what I'd like to see. It's this, and this, and then follow up in a week and, hey, did you get a chance to do that? Like, that's what I'm talking about. But people experience that as this huge overbearing pressure. And I found out about that later, and that people, didn't have the greatest experience. And, I've apologized to the individuals who talked to me about that, but also it's a learning experience of, like, I'll probably be managing people in the future in some form. And if any of you are, that's something to know, is, understand people's abilities and meet them at their abilities, but then also if you're working with anybody, you gotta not expect more than is reasonable for who the person is and what they are capable of offering. And I'm trying to be careful about saying capable of offering, because, even the most brilliant, skilled person in the world, if they're stressed and there's things going on in their life and they're working a full-time job or two, and they have like 2 hours to contribute to something. It's not that they're not capable of doing it; it's that they're not capable of offering that to the project at this time. Did you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I would say it is very difficult. I've learned a lot of hard lessons and have, in fact, made significant errors. In AGDQ 2017, we had a very ambitious project involving 2 Nintendo consoles and a Super Nintendo.
It was the one with the Skype call on the Super Nintendo.
Yeah, AGDQ 2017. It was crazy. I pushed too hard, and I pushed my volunteers too hard, and I lost a very important volunteer to me as a result of that. And so this was a lesson I also had to learn as a leader, is these are volunteers, and they can vol and don't. They can, if you push them too hard, they leave. And it's always really interesting trying to figure out.
And not only do they leave and there's emotional baggage.
Right, and there's damage, and then it's not like they're an employee. You can't make them do something. It's not like they're in any obligation socially to ever talk to you again, so sometimes an apology can't even be delivered. There's all these aspects of working with volunteers that have, I've just had to learn as I go. And I think that's a lot of what this comes down to, is it's just a learning experience. Every new project you go through, you learn how to interact with people in a different way. Yeah.
So next slide. This is basically the last topic here. So first of all, credit to Rebecca Tripp, who, I don't know if any of you know her, but she was our sort of guided. I was sort of in charge of the scenario, but she was very much guiding my thoughts on it. And she also arranged the Chamber of Sages music for Triforce Percent, the hacked up version that we use. I did Triforce Percent because of what it meant in a artistic and philosophical way. The Arbitrary Code Execution exploit allows us to have complete control of the console, and the Triforce allows Link to have mastery over Hyrule. And so using Ace to get the Triforce, basically what we did is at the beginning, as soon as we did the setup and Link wiggles around and then we get the little green bar and the console is pwned, at that point, Link is effectively a god. He can do whatever he would want to do, but Link, the character in the game, doesn't understand that. He's just been sort of, however you want to say the relationship between Link and the player, but he's just done this weird set of things that he can't understand that have resulted in the fabric of reality changing, but he doesn't understand that. And so the plot that we created made that ability concrete for him by having him not just get the Triforce immediately, but build up to it. It made sense to him. And then See the Future took that further, because it was us coming together and the worlds of Zelda colliding, and then the Zelda world and our world merging together. So those are the kinds of themes that I cared about here. And I did this project because once I had the idea, even before the exploit happened, I felt that this needed to be done. I saw it as, as we've said in that line, making people's dreams come true. But there's an aspect of that sort of unfolded after the event that I realized about what we were doing. And this will get a little abstract, but I hope this can make sense. And you don't have to necessarily subscribe to any particular philosophy to understand what I'm saying here. But now I forgot my train of thought.
Does it perhaps involve some aspects of balance and things that happened in the past coming back in the future?
Well, not the balance part, but yeah, childhoods and
the fulfillment of things,
Yeah, sorry, I'm just, after all this talking, I'm just, my brain completely went blank. I apologize.
An element of karma, perhaps?
Yeah. So, you can think about the concept of karma. There's like negative karma. You say, oh, you hit somebody and then they, you have some karma in with them. And, again, I'm not trying to get into a whole like religious thing. It's not really about that. But we have attachments to things in the world. And sometimes those are like negative attachments if we've had some problem with things, but they can also be positive attachments. And when people played Ocarina of Time, because of the whole unfinished aspect and how there was all these contents left on the cartridge and things that the urban legends and all of this, people experienced the game, but their experience with the game wasn't resolved. People kept coming back to it and seeing, because they felt like, oh, well, maybe I can find some new thing. Maybe I can find, not, most people didn't expect, oh, maybe I can find the Triforce, but maybe there's some other little piece of something that I didn't discover. And we made this effectively fan fiction for Ocarina of Time that we tricked hundreds of thousands of people into watching. But what that did was it made those things concrete and allowed people's attachment. It allowed people to let go of their attachment to the game. It resolved the plot, and then people can actually move on. And you can think of that as a positive or a negative thing of like, oh well, that's part of the value of Ocarina of Time. That's part of what made it so great is the attachment. But from all of those comments that we got from people of saying, you've touched my childhood or made something complete, that was really what we were doing, is people had this unresolved attachment to the game, and we created an experience for them that would let them release it. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with EMDR, the like therapy technique, but it involves sort of going into your subconscious and rewriting your emotional response to some, often a traumatic event or something that happened in your past. And when I first heard about this, it was like, oh, I don't want like my memories to be rewritten in therapy. I don't want that kind of thing. But it's not like at a conscious level. It's like allowing you to go through the emotional experience of something and then have a different resolution to it that allows you to like finish processing it and let it go and let it move through you. And that, again, I didn't realize this until afterwards, but that's sort of what we did here. We created this alternative ending by actually rewriting the game's memory. So it was, again, sort of at the level of what we're doing to the console, and also at the level of what people are experiencing from it, is this, going back and rewriting a piece of their childhood and allowing it to be resolved in a new way and allowing them to move forward from that. So that was the whole, that connects to the whole see the future thing. Let us create the future together. The future of Zelda, the future of video gaming, whatever you want, however you want to say it.
Yeah, and it was really echoed over and over again, not just on one video, but all of them. Whether it was ours, the one from GDQ, the one from Retro Game Mechanics Explained even, the comments consistently echoed the same feeling of, you have put together something that completes a piece of my childhood. And the fact that it came from so many different people and such a broad base was what really touched me, is that we were able to do something that was far bigger than anything that we could have done individually on our own. The team coming together to put all of the heart into the writing, the art, the voice acting, it culminated in something that felt like closure. So I think that was probably the thing that was most interesting.
Slide, please.
So speaking of closure.
And it's 4 o'clock, so
Yeah.
perfect. I'd love to be able to take Q&A. It will depend on when Mag will throw us out of this room because there's something else at 4:30, but we can do a little bit of Q&A until somebody tells us to leave. Anyone have any? Anyone have any questions? Feel free to step up to the mic and.
More of a technical question.
Yeah.
How much data do you guys transfer in the initial portion? And have you guys thought about how long it would theoretically take for a human to actually make all those inputs?
So sort of. So the amount of data, so in the initial portion where it was just like the up until getting the green bar, that was, I don't remember, there was a few hundred bytes. Well, I guess it would be a few kilobytes. And then once the green bar hyperspeed loader, then it was about 1.2 megabytes or something like that.
Okay.
So we filled up like a third of the expansion pack.
Okay.
And how long would it take a human to do that? We didn't ever calculate that out for the full thing, but we have just talked a little bit about possibly doing a try-first% RTA in the future, where you use no Tasbot, just a human. You use the ACE exploit to modify the file select screen. This part has already been done, so that the limitation on the length of Link's name stops. It doesn't exist anymore.
Oh, so you can just
So
type
you can
it
keep
in.
typing.
Yeah.
You start typing Link's name, and you just keep typing into memory, and then you just like type as much as you want, and then you can use that to overwrite things, and you can put in the beginning of a payload. So that part has been done by other people for other categories, but then the idea would be you use that to write in a hex editor, and you bring up an on-screen hex editor, and then we would just write in just the Triforce scene, like minimum content, and that would be like, a few, maybe 50 kilobytes or something, or maybe more, maybe 100 kilobytes or something like that. So then it's like, well, how fast can you write 100 kilobytes into a hex editor with an N64 controller? So probably a few hours.
Okay, cool. That would be really
like
neat
that.
to see. Yeah.
I don't plan to try it myself, though.
Yeah.
Hey, so I actually have 2 questions. The first one being, why did you stop at, say, at the hyper speed loader? Was there a physical limitation before, for example, pulling faster, more than 8 times per second on the
Frame.
controllers? Oh, 8 times per frame on the controller.
Yeah.
Or was that more of a, this is probably good enough? Because I know you mentioned before that it took 6, 7, 8 minutes to do normally, so.
Yeah, so we tried 16 times per frame, but it would start lagging. So the thing is, the N64 is actually kind of a modern computer. The CPU is just a single core, but it has proper multi-threading support. So like the game has like 10 threads or something. So one of them does controllers, one of them does audio, one of them does, so various things. So the controller thread, it actually doesn't take a lot of CPU time to pull the controllers. It just starts, there's an external chip that does it. It starts that and then waits for it to finish, but while it's waiting, it does other things. So the thing is that it takes most of it takes actually like half of the wall clock time for each frame to start and then wait for it to finish. But it's not waiting and doing nothing. It's doing useful work during that time. So making it inject twice as much would have made it start lagging, and then it wouldn't have been a great experience.
Yeah, as it is, we were able to do that 5400 rate without any noticeable perceivable lag.
Yeah.
Okay. For the second one, did you find the CRC in the packets to be useful during development, or was
That's a great question. So what happens is when you go through a loading zone, the game will suspend reading controllers. I don't exactly know the whole mechanism behind that, but basically you get errors every time you go through a loading zone in terms of the injection, and it redoes it. It's not actually CRC fails. It's like it didn't get enough responses of rumbles. So that is absolutely needed for the project to work. As far as the CRCs itself, we didn't have any instances of them failing once the code was all working until Dwango was at one of your events recently, and there was one of these things wasn't clicked in all the way, and it was like loose, and then we got like a stream of pouring out of like CRC error, and then we pushed the thing in and then it continued.
Yeah,
So-
it told me what the problem was.
Right.
Yeah, I knew there was an issue. We checked our cables. Sure enough, it was a cable. It's always the
Yeah.
cable.
So it didn't. So yeah, it didn't. It never helped until after Triforce% already happened.
Yeah.
And the 4 bytes, was that just was that just like a good safe number, or
For the
was it-
CRC
Yeah.
length? Yeah, I mean, it's enough that you have a 1 in 4 billion chance of it being
Right.
falsely wrong. So that's, that's good enough.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi. Maybe you spoke about this earlier in the presentation. I'm sorry. I had a few other things that I had to pay attention to. But can you tell me at all, did you guys ever end up having to use, the N64 is infamously hard, or persnickety might be a better word, of getting a handle on in terms of emulation or doing things, because Nintendo has their own microcode system like that helps support the help support the hardware and get things running efficiently. Did you guys have to sort of delve into that, or can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, the cell shading required a microcode patch.
Okay.
So that was really the only part that we changed to microcode for. It was a simple change to move lighting information from the shade green channel to the shade alpha channel. And that won't make any sense to most people, but yeah, basically the system already computes lighting, but it puts the lighting into the color. And we needed it to put the lighting into the alpha in order to use the alpha compare, which is how the cell shading was done. So yes, we had to get into that. Somebody made a microcode disassembler that was a little buggy. It was good enough for me to be able to modify it, but then I had to actually encode the instructions by hand into machine code and manually write in those machine code values into a file to get as part of the patching. Does that properly answer your question? I guess a better, broader answer would be that there's a Blender tool called Fast64, which is used for all of the graphics, and a whole bunch of people contributed to that, not just me, but I wrote the cutscene tools for that. There was a previous program that was used for cutscenes in other like older ROM hacks, and that kind of was not a great program. So yeah, so I had to work on Fast64 a bunch for the cell shading and for the cutscenes and stuff. So yeah, I got into all the nitty-gritty graphical stuff. It's actually, I wouldn't say it was like a terrible machine to work with. I would say it was actually kind of modern, a lot more modern than, let's say, the PlayStation 1. Though I haven't done really any development on the PS1 at all. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, thank you for that.
All right.
Anyone here from MAG to tell us to leave? Okay.
Not yet. I am, however, going to close it down unless there's any last questions. First of all, thank you so much for coming to the panel. Thank you for coming for the parts that you liked and putting up with the parts you didn't come here for. If you want any more information, please head over to discord.gg/Tasbot. Head over to our Discord server. We have a Triforce% channel. If you would like one of these rather expensive and quite nice stickers,
you don't have to tell the public that they're expensive, but okay.
They're really high quality. Let's go with that. We have some here on the table, so feel free to come up and grab them.
They are decals, so you pull off the back first, and then stick it on the thing, and then pull off the front.
Yeah, they are very nice. My son loves them. For anyone who is listening to this and would like to get involved in future content, we are probably trying to go to space next, so if that's your thing, let me know. We're always looking for volunteers, and don't think
he's not joking.
Yeah, I'm not joking. We're trying to take over a derelict satellite. Don't tell anyone. But that doesn't mean that we can't use your skills, whether it is just as a writer or a moderator or just someone who is interested in chatting and things. We can always use you, so don't feel like just because we had a lot of people who were very specifically very good at microcode and other random things.
Well, I wasn't good at microcode when I started, and I'm not sure I would say I'm good at it now.
Now, yeah, that sounds all right. Hey, I didn't know any Blender before, and now I know some Blender, so thank you very much.
I coerced Dwango into making half of the staff roll screen cutscenes because...
my son even helped. It was awesome. So if I can get my son to help with this, trust me. Anyway, no, he's awesome. He was great to work with. Anyway, we're always looking for folks, so head on over. You can also find more task content. One of the other things, I'm the senior ambassador, senior staff member of taskvideos.org, so feel free to swing by taskvideos.org to see more tool-assisted speedrun content, and head over to task.bot to see more content on real consoles. Most of it actually happens, I'm going to be honest, it happens on youtube.com/DwangoAC. But I'm DwangoAC, this is Sauraen, and I think that's it.